Here's a shocker. Illinois is set to get a new congressman, and the state is still without a budget. That's coming up next on Capitol View. Whoa, you would have never guessed it. Illinois still doesn't have a state budget. This one, however, isn't Aaron Schocker, new congressional election to fill former Congressman Aaron Schock's seat in the 18th District. By the time you see this, we'll have a winner. I'm Amanda Vinicky, your host for Capitol View this week. Typically, I am the State House Bureau Chief for Illinois Public Radio and WUIS in Springfield, joined once again by Matt Porter of WCIA. And also, we have Dave Dahl back on the circuit. He is the man at IRN's State House Bureau. So thanks, Dave.
Nice to be with you, Amanda.
Thanks, bud. All right. Let's get started here with the election. We won't know of this taping who is the successful candidate. We have Democrat Rob Mellon, he's a teacher from Quincy, up against State Senator Mellon-Lahood. His father had served in Congress and then went on, despite his being a Republican, to serve under President Barack Obama's administration in the cabinet. This is a pretty solidly Republican district, so just let's throw it out there. Is there any way that the next time Capitol View tapes, there won't be another Congressman Lahood?
I think it's very unlikely that Mr. Mellon pulls it off. I think the problems that we're seeing so far is that it's a drawn Republican district, but the bigger issue, and we can talk about this right now, is as of Thursday afternoon, turnout is
miserable,
very low, and so that usually favors the candidate who already has the heavy, Republican base in the district. So I think Mr. Mellon has been an underdog, and he's made a lot of speeches. He's gotten a lot of attention for someone who's just a school teacher and an Army veteran, not someone who's been into politics. But I think this is a race that was tough from the get-go, and I think with the turnout we're seeing already on Thursday, it would be very unlikely that we're talking about Mr. Mellon being in Congress next week.
And Dave, I know that you are a committed citizen going to cast a vote. Don't worry, I would never ask you who you are going to be voting for, not that you'd share. But can you revisit for us why it is that in September we have an election? We actually are at a point where candidates for the 2016 election are gathering signatures. It seems way close. Let's revisit Aaron Schock, and it all really started with some Downton Abbey, right?
First of all, as a fail-safe, I think we should tape two versions of the program.
Just
one,
in case, huh?
as if LaHood is the winner. One, as if Mellon is the winner. Use the correct one. With regard to Congressman Schock, the fall was fast and steep and seemingly well-placed if you look at the various blogs and things of that nature talking about Capitol Facts and Politico. A Washington Post reporter happened to see Congressman Schock's office with red walls. I think the word bordello might have been deployed as a comparison by somebody. And then the question of, well, how was this paid for? Somebody from this area had donated design services or something like that, and it hadn't been reported properly as a gift. The value of the services was too much. And then here on Instagram, is Congressman Schock here, there, everywhere? How was this paid for? Staff members going to concerts, people going hither and yon, trips by Congressman Schock on of the Green Auto Dealership family, a private plane.
And a car that wasn't listed accurately with the mileage.
He had obtained I want to say this correctly, I think it's a Chevy Tahoe from one of the Green dealerships, and claimed as reimbursement more miles on the car than the car really had on the odometer. So it just seems like for someone who nothing would stick to, right. It seemed like everything was sticking to him in terms of all manner of alleged
Maybe it was all the
abuse.
tanning lotion.
Well, here's what I really think, and let me wrap up a little bit. Just as it seemed the feds were closing in and questioning everybody around him and on his staff, he abruptly dropped out of Congress. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought he would weather the storm and stick it out. But what I really think is that he didn't get his way on the leadership track, and he found out he wasn't really going to be in position to have much of an impact in the halls of Congress, other than as a fundraiser, a rainmaker, and a show pony. And so it might be a little bit of a leap for me to say this, but from that disappointment, it just seems like he just
went a little wild.
He sowed all his wild oats. Yeah, that's right.
And he was really young, 33, when all of this went down. So had a very promising political career for sure ahead of him. This is still bearing out in the federal courthouse, actually in the city of Springfield. There have been some of those individuals that you noted, Dave, have made appearances there and will continue to follow. Remains to be seen, as we said, whether the voters will punish Republicans and see this as a partisan issue, or if this is more of an individual, one who'd been really popular in the district, but no more. Matt, I can tell you've got something
Well,
you
I
want
was
to
just going to say, he's young, and I think the question was there wasn't discipline there. There wasn't the congressmen and people in the legislature, the state legislature say he just didn't have a mentor. He didn't have people to tell him, how to get things through. And we talk about the rebel. Really, he also was driving that car after the subpoenas. The papers show he was still being lent a car into April after the march. So I think there wasn't a lot of discipline with him as well. He just,
And it's weird for such a disciplined guy. He's got this workout regimen for sure. He'd worked his fanny off to get to Congress. He had been fairly prolific in fundraising and actually with his own money. He was no slouch by any means as a student and having a side career in real estate and such. So exactly. So it really is an interesting psychological phenomenon as well as a political one, really.
It's fascinating to see how it turns out, and that's how we come to now where we're having a new congressman, either Congressman LaHood or Congressman Mellon.
And I should add that despite a request by county clerks for a little bit of money to either come through from Congressman Chuck, that hasn't happened. No state money either. And clerks had asked for a bit of reprieve from some of the same-day voter registration laws that weren't supposed to be in place until the 2016 elections because nobody thought that we'd have one in 2015. They got a no on that. The General Assembly passed on by. So it is going to be costing taxpayers some extra to choose this congressperson who will be in for several months after Illinois has been without one for several. So that's my segue into the fiscal 16 budget impasse. We are in September now, so that has been July, August. Now, a couple of weeks into September, still no budget. Let's go back to actually last week. There was a whole lot of action as the Democrats attempted to override Governor Bruce Rauner's veto of a budget that's somewhat tangentially related to the budget. The governor, Bruce Rauner, Republican, had said that it was going to cost the state a whole ton of money if he wasn't able to negotiate a new contract with AFSCME. That's the state's largest public employees union. AFSCME said, hey, he's threatening to shut down. The asks that he's making are just too big. They wanted to basically move to forced arbitration. That vote fell because there was a missing state representative, at least in part. He says, don't put all the blame on me. That's Ken Duncan, a Democrat from Chicago. What do we make of now this week, really about a week after all of this went down, House Speaker Michael Madigan issuing a statement of rebuke? Dave.
Well, I asked Steve Brown about this, who'd be the spokesman for Speaker Madigan. What do we get from this statement that we didn't already know?
Yeah.
We thought we had 71. One thing that's interesting about the statement is that both Duncan and Scott Drury, who voted no, the only Democrat to vote no, were specifically called out by name.
And Jack Franks wasn't. He voted present.
Jack Franks did vote present. You're correct.
And he wasn't named in this press release.
No, he wasn't. It happens almost a few minutes after Duncan and Drury get done appearing on Chicago Tonight on public TV in Chicago, and I think there probably was some interest on Brown's part, acting for Madigan, to try to get the spin going back their way. And he wouldn't use the word lie, but he said they had been told that there would be 71 yes votes. I have a feeling that once there weren't going to be 71 Democrats, certainly Franks thought it would be okay not to vote yes. And as far as Drury's concerned, well, he's kind of an outlier.
Is there at any point going to be a way that we will get to the bottom of this and find out who was telling the truth? You have Madigan and a labor leader, Michael Kerrigan, both saying that they had guarantees from Representative Duncan that he would be in Springfield for this vote and was a yes, and also from Drury, who had voted for sending it to arbitration the first time around back in May when this initially went through the General Assembly. Is there any way to know who's telling the truth here, or do we just have to say, this is politics, you can't get inside their brains, and who really cares, because the result is that arbitration didn't pass?
Well,
go ahead.
When you talk about excellent lawmakers, out of the 177 who are at the Capitol, well, I'm not sure Ken Duncan is in the photo, at least in the first few. And he also missed a vote when they were voting to get Blagojevich impeached. He wasn't there. And he saw fit to put out a news release saying that he and his family were on a long-planned cruise. And I thought, well, maybe I should interview him about this. So I got out my equipment and I had the news release and I was interviewing him about it. He grabbed the news release out of my hand, turned it around so it was right side up, and read from it into the microphone. So is there a connection between that kind of behavior and what we're seeing now these weeks with Representative Duncan? The other thing is they have 71 and only 71. They're
minimum.
They're gonna need 71 on some vote in the future. So I don't think they can kick them too hard.
So the speaker can't give them too great a lashing. A press release after they've come out and had a conversation table similar to this one, okay. But be careful, because there are going to be further tough votes ahead.
I don't see how you can burn your bridge with someone who still makes up one of the 71. Still, people are unhappy.
And I think for Speaker Madigan, this is just now he's like worrying, well, is Duncan going to come? Is he not? I think this is a matter of confidence now for the speaker of how much can he put in Speaker or in Ken Duncan's hands. I would say, whatever the reason, Ken Duncan had said to Charles Thomas, CBS reporter, that he wasn't coming because Madigan's budget hadn't done enough for the black community. And I said, well, he missed the child care vote. That is a vote that would have helped African Americans.
He says he's a sponsor.
And you missed that critical vote. I mean, everyone's talking about the AFSCME bill and the consequences of that, but there were several other bills that day that fell short by one vote, and I think the child care is one that we're going to see come up again.
That one we can. The rest of these, there
right,
was a
we can. There's a deadline, but I mean, those are long-lasting effects. And I think also, if I'm Representative Golar, who checked herself out of the hospital to be there, I think there's definitely probably a lot of frustration with Ken Duncan not coming, not appearing on a day they knew.
All throughout this theory, because I know this was probably dissected to death last week, but we're going to have to continue to really look on this because of the lasting impact that it could make in terms of the Democratic majorities and what effect this has on the impasse. But you look at it, and in some way, could this be a win for House Speaker Michael Madigan, in that he has long said, we can't pass a tax increase on our own, despite the 71 members, and this is proof. Whereas if it had gone forward, Rauner could have thrown his hands up and said, what's the point of me even being here?
I think a lot of us are wondering that about ourselves. Nevertheless,
I'm not going to contradict you on that one.
I think it does two things, Amanda. One, it does put all the Republicans on the record that they voted, that they took this certain vote and
campaign brochures
for the mailer. That is correct. The other thing is it gives lie to the refrain that we've been hearing from Rauner's press office, Speaker Madigan and the Democrats he controls. Speaker Madigan will tell you, I'm only one lawmaker. I'm only one man. I don't belong to an organized party. I'm a Democrat.
Clearly, I can't control these guys.
Yeah, I can't get you 71. See, and this is proof. So perhaps that was one of his thoughts. On the other hand, maybe it wasn't.
And if
I'll tell you what, he said that the only reason we called the bill is because Mike
Asked me
Smitty, well, he said first that evening, was it Wednesday of last week, the sponsor, Mike Smitty, wanted it called. Are you kidding me?
Madigan wanted it called too. A lot of people wanted it called, I'm
That
guessing.
somebody who's not a household name in his own household has the autonomy to call this big bill?
that
And then
ain't
in the
go.
later statement made by Brown this week, yes, it AFSCME wanted it called too. AFSCME wanted to see who had the red light up there.
I'm guessing all of them wanted it called there.
If you want to be optimistic too, and granted there's not a lot of reason to be optimistic,
No.
a victory for Bruce Rauner in this AFSCME bill, does that give him something he needs to put in his back pocket so maybe they can come to the table and maybe he can compromise on one of the other issues Madigan is more concerned about? That's something I've talked with people about. Could that, and I mean that's really being optimistic.
Yeah, I'm not
There's-
sure how much Madigan cares about
you-
that AFSCME contract. I'm going to say
right.
no.
Well, but if he doesn't care, and if it's a big thing for Governor Rauner, then it's something Governor Rauner
Mm-hmm.
can say, we broke the spirit of Mike Madigan, we prevented this from happening, and then maybe Speaker Madigan, who cares more about one of the other non-budget issues that Governor Rauner wants, is that an
Is that a
open
breaking
door
point?
for compromise on one of the other issues?
And we'll see. They hadn't been meeting. Maybe they'll finally come together again. This comes as the Illinois Senate has passed another supplemental, or Republicans would phrase it, piecemeal budget matter, as so much of the state budget is going out because of consent decrees and laws that require money to basically be spent automatically. You have some social services that are left out. We've had a lawsuit now from a pair of lottery winners who got over $25,000. Lucky them, you'd think, but they've only gotten an IOU so far because without a budget, the state can't pay. Senate says it's got a solution. It has come up with a measure and passed it with, as you expected, all Democratic support, no Republicans, that would basically spend another roughly $4 billion, half of that approximately from the state's general revenue fund that we focus so much on. And so now it goes to the House. What are our thoughts? First of all, let's take it with the budget, this $1.8 billion of GRF money. Are Democrats right that there are people that are just being punished so severely, they're so slight, that it's fair to bring them into the fold with all these other consent decrees? Or are Republicans correct that they are going to need to figure a budget out before all this money is spent?
It's budgeting on the fly. They'll do it until we run out.
This isn't the first time the Democrats have introduced such a legislation. They've been doing it
For it to go nowhere.
all summer. And the Senate has the supermajority easy. They can pass these bills, but we all know once it gets to the House how difficult it is to get that 71. And if this was just the lottery bill and the motor fuel tax bill, I'd say maybe it has more hope because those are revenue funds that are already there. They just need the approval to spend from them. But that $1.8 billion they want to spend in the general revenue fund that they've added to, I mean, that's a dead story for Republicans. They didn't get any votes in the Senate. It's going to be
But
the
maybe
same.
the 71 Democrats will stick together in the House this time around.
Not only 71, but 71 to override the veto.
Right?
Right, they need 71, and they can't get all the Democratic lawmakers. Again, Representative Golar, who can't make it down this early for health reasons every single time. That's a question. Can the Democrats get all 71 there? Because
They're not
not
even
going to
back
get.
for 2 weeks.
They're not going to be back for 2 weeks.
And the Senate won't be back until early October. So I feel like after a lot of continual session, they're laying off a little bit, and it's as if there's really no hope of coming to any sort of solution anytime soon. Or perhaps, I don't know, Dave, is that a false storyline? Is it a sign of hope that the full General Assembly isn't going to be back when so many of these decisions really are made at the top level? You don't need everybody here.
You're right. You don't need everybody, and we're proving we don't need a budget. Everyone's getting paid. The schools are open.
Not everyone. You'd have those state workers are.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
The state workers, the state lawmakers. You know, you see a state police car. The red and blue lights still are going on those. They're pulling people over. Prisons. There's no
There's no obvious impact.
to use a buzzword that's being overused now. Pressure point. There's no incentive to do it. Nobody cares.
But we got key dates coming up. September 30th, layoffs that have been proposed will take effect. We know the layoffs in the State Museum and other parts of the IDNR, that gun center start at that period. And there could be other layoffs to come, not to mention all the nonprofits. And this is the angle that we don't see as much because it's not state workers, but all those nonprofits that rely on state funding, they're closing up shop. And will they come back? Will we get the state museum
Public health
back?
centers, rape crisis hotlines, homeless shelters, state universities. The University of Illinois, he came out after a board meeting and said, we can't even do a budget because we don't know how much we're going to depend on. And right now we're making do, but every month you get another $70 million we're supposed to be getting from the state. It's effective.
And when you close up shop, when these places close up shop, it's not guaranteed they come back. The workers they have to lay off, they're going to have to go find other jobs. They can't wait on the state. They don't have union strike funds or anything like that. So I think, yes, there's not a lot of pressure points, but I think we're getting now to the point where we're going to see more pressure points come up.
If they care as much as they say they do, then why aren't they doing it?
You tell me. I don't know.
Yeah.
They all seem to care. They all say they care. I'm sure that there's a lot of frustration, I think, beyond not just the public, but legislators themselves, and yet there's no groundswell from below. You have both sides. Republicans are really sticking with the governor. Democrats are really saying no to the governor's wish list. They say it's just against their raison d'etre.
When I talk to the rank and file members, they are probably the most frustrated people in that Capitol because they're waiting for their leaders to make phone calls. I talked to Republican, lawmaker, Democrat, and they're just like, we just want our leaders to call each other, start talking on the phone, and maybe things will get somewhere. And they're kind of in a rock and a hard place because what are they going to do? They cast one vote opposite or the other, they're going to be looked down. So maybe there'll be a groundswell at some point of these lawmakers in independent districts who say enough's enough, but I don't think that's coming soon.
Dave, explain that. Why is Illinois so leadership driven? Why can't this rise from the rank and files? Are we giving them a pass by saying that, or is that how it's set up?
Well, number one, the Republican leaders seem to be very reluctant to say anything against the governor. And the other thing is, some would say that the cutback amendment of 1980 only consolidated the power of the Speaker of the House. So it seems as if the Speaker controls not only his caucus, or at least many of the members of it, maybe not all 71, but he controls their campaign funds. He's the leader of the Democratic Party in Illinois. He's got a statewide operation, and the events of the last few decades have allowed him to amass power. And if you're Mike Madigan, that's pretty cool.
To use that term pressure point, the comptroller, Leslie Munger, has unveiled new numbers, is what she shows about the bill backlog and about how much the state is spending right now are those additional pressure points.
I don't know about that, but I think that we can say that Comptroller Munger has not done much to show that she's independent of the governor.
They're literally some of the same lines that she utters, the same phrases as the governor says. Of course, Rauner appointed Munger to that spot, and that is an additional election for next year. We've got Democrats fighting for a primary, but she seems to be the GOP appointee, very much following the Rauner guideline. But Matt, what did she have to say about that bill backlog?
Well, I mean, it's just growing. It was 5.5, now it's 6.5. We're going to over more than 8. And that's a serious problem. If the state gets so backlogged on bills, I think your biggest worry is that vendors lose confidence in dealing business with the state. Like, why am I going to do this for you when I don't know if you're ever going to pay me? So that's a serious problem for her, but I don't think there's much she can do until a budget is formed and she can start paying bills again. What I find interesting, and maybe
comptroller treasurer, you don't really have the authority to decide the budget.
Yeah, no, you're stuck. Like, okay. But I think one of the issues is she's been fighting the courts for a while and but she's going to go back to Bruce Rauner and say, this is affecting my office. I can't pay anything. We need to let some of the money through. And I don't know if she's willing to do that because, like I said, there's an election.
I'm not sure how much influence she'd have over Rauner anyway. He's got to know all this. None of this is a surprise. No. It's just getting those raw figures. Dave, did you have something to add there before we move on real quickly?
No, I just was going to say that what with the appointment and both being Republicans and the personality of Governor Rauner, I think Controller Munger is not one of the more likely people to say, Governor Rauner, you're wrong. I don't think there are many of those people around in his circle.
Now, moving on
remember the
to
last
another big figure in Illinois politics and constitutional office, Attorney General Lisa Madigan. Previously, she'd asked for an extension, told the U.S. Supreme Court that she wanted a little bit of extra time to decide whether or not she would take the 2013 overhaul of state pensions that reduced benefits for workers to them after the state Supreme Court had knocked it down. This week, she says she's not going to go there. So either of you, is that a surprise at all? Is she giving up for political reasons or for legal reasons? And what does that mean for pensions?
I think Lisa Madigan wants to send this back to lawmakers, try to say, here's what the court said. You have to come up with a pension plan that's going to be more in line with law. I think she must have seen this as a losing battle. There were some clear judicial determinations at the state court level and the below it, and I think she must have looked and said, I'm an attorney. We've got good attorneys here. I don't think it's gonna pass the Supreme Court, and it would cost the state a lot of money just to go do it. I think she probably agrees with many other people. The pension reform needs to come through the state legislature. They need to do it again.
Yet we don't know what was the Attorney General's office made in those determinations. Mm-hmm. They had a review, but that was not made public. We just got a couple of statements.
This is pure speculation. Yeah.
But of course, Dave, real quickly here, any political sides to that? Do you think there was a political calculation? And also, all right, so the 2013 law, it is gone, it is dead. We haven't seen a whole lot of action from legislators with additional proposals or new fixes, have we?
We just got one this week from Representative Mark Batnick, although he is a short tenured Republican, so I don't know how much impact that'll have with regard to a lump sum or acceleration similar to what GM and Ford do. Good luck with that. But yeah, and in terms of the Attorney General, it seems like it's a sin of omission, not sin of commission, in terms of trying to disrupt or further disrupt things or try to fix things.
So no pension law, not a whole lot of activity on that front. Quick couple of extra add-ins here. We did have Exelon, this huge power company, despite making a power play really for a save from the General Assembly, say that it is going to hold off closing any nuclear plants despite that threat previously. Also a visit in Eureka, Illinois. That is where former President Ronald Reagan went to college. We had a visit from a wannabe president, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. That's all for this edition of Capitol View. You can find us on Facebook at CapitolViewPolitics. I'm Amanda Vinicky, State House Bureau Chief for Illinois Public Radio and WUIS. And thanks so much to our guests, WCIA's Matt Porter and Illinois Radio Network's Dave Dahl.
Thank you.
Thanks.